Hi, this is Kevin Frank. Today is August 31st, the last day of August, and for what many consider as we kind of wrap up and go into Labor Day weekend, the end of summer as we know it. And I think I heard something, Jeff, about start of meteorological fall tomorrow. So maybe some of this humidity is out of the air finally will cool things down and enjoy some of this weather from the extreme heat and humidity we experienced over the weekend. So, Jeff, we look
Right.
forward to hearing from you this week and letting us know what's coming up.
Well, as you mentioned, there are some significant changes here that have taken place over the last few days, and this is a very, from a meteorological standpoint, a very straightforward forecast. I almost we could use the word autopilot for this one, but big changes from where we've been over the last couple of weeks. On the front here, just as a sort of summarize what we're dealing with here, looking ahead. Left hand side here, this is the predicted jet stream flow here for the next 5 days. And the one on the right hand side here, this is predicted jet stream flow next week. And so there are changes expected next week, but to start here off at the beginning here, where we are now, and for this week, basically for the work week, you can see there's a trough out over the west, and then there's another troughing feature out over the east. We're sort of in between here with a little bit of northwesterly flow aloft. That will have a significant influence on our weather for the week, but we are very close to normal here in terms of temperature and a dry week. Very little in the way of storm track or any weather disturbances with this kind of a flow. But once we get to next week, note here that there is an expected development of a fairly significant trough, certainly for, well, the beginning of September. So that is suggesting that we're going to trend cooler than normal next week. But for at least for the next most of a week, at least 5 days, we're going to be looking at temperatures maybe within a degree or two of where the climatology says we should be for this time of the year, with very few chances for precipitation. So in some ways, if you've got outdoor field work, et cetera, that you've been waiting for, this is the opportunity. All of the 75-degree dew point, excessive humidity that we've seen here over, it seems like forever, but for the last couple of weeks, that's all gone. It's going to be very comfortable. And again, with temperatures very close to what climatology tells us or where they should be this time of the year. Now, looking at that last week, it's fairly remarkable. Some colors we typically don't see on our mean temperature departure here for the last week. You can see in some cases, the mean temperature was 10 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. It's anytime we get into double digits, you know that you've done something climatologically. It's not easy to do that, but we did. And of course, if you think back about what we were experiencing last week, much of that occurred, well, some of it was during the day because we had a lot of high temperatures up in the upper 80s, even some low 90s, but especially at night, our nighttime temperatures in many cases stayed in the low 70s. That's at least 13-14 degrees above normal from where we typically are this time of the year. And again, you can see that reflected here with all the region and certainly all of the state way above the normals. And certainly there's going to be a reflection of that in our degree day totals. They charged here, really surged over the last couple of weeks. And I'll show you that map here in just a moment. Given the precipitation we've had recently before the drier air moved in here over the last day or two, we did have another round of some pretty significant rainfall, especially across the central portion of lower Michigan. Much of this area you can see here in yellow, at least 2 inches. In many cases, we had reports 3, even 4-inch rainfall totals, but everybody got some precipitation across the state, a little bit less down here in portions of the southwest or the west of Grand Rapids. And then there was some spottier rain up in upper Michigan, but in general, it was a wetter than normal week for much of the state. And again, in some cases, the rainfall was very heavy and localized basis. We actually had some flooding reported in a few places. So again, depends on location, but generally a wetter than normal week. And thinking back about this crazy season that began way too dry, actually going all the way back into late last year, 2020, through the winter and through the spring, we were much drier than normal. And then we had this huge, this is for Kalamazoo. It's representative of a lot of southern lower Michigan. So it's one site, but the accumulated precip here is in green. But this very wet period here in the third week of June. That was followed by a dry spell here into early July. And then we had, again, as most remember, we had another very, very wet couple weeks during the latter half of July, in some cases in the beginning of August. And you can see that for this particular site that we have, well, almost 3 3/4 inches above the long-term normals. Again, when there were times when we were 6, 7, even 8 inches in deficit. So we've gone from one extreme to the other, and the averages just don't do justice to they cancel deficits early, canceled out by surpluses later on, and it doesn't sound like much, but we've been all over the map. Certainly in terms of conditions. And I'll show you, it's still like that in parts of the state if we look at soil moisture. First, though, I mentioned the degree days totals, and the actual totals themselves here through yesterday are on the left-hand side here. We picked up several hundred degree day units over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And now, again, we did have surpluses before of maybe half to 1 week. Those have jumped. And in many areas, we're at least a week and a half above normal calendar time wise, but in many cases, even 2 weeks, calendar weeks ahead of normal, thanks or given all of that warmer than normal weather that we've had over, again, the last, especially the last month, the last several weeks. I mentioned soil moisture here, and on the right-hand side, these are percentiles of plant extractable moisture in the top 3 feet. And you can see they range, the browns here are values that are less than where we typically are. And remember, this is a time of the year where we're depleting our subsoil pretty rapidly, usually getting down towards our annual minimum in plant extractable moisture in the profile. But we do have in the northern lower, we still have a lot of greens and blues, indicating that the moisture there right now is much above where it typically is. That's very true places like Traverse City, but many areas of northern lower Michigan with all of the precipitation, above normal precipitation, are at above normal levels. Some exceptions here in the thumb. You can see there's increasing areas also of southern lower Michigan that have trended dry or drier than normal here over the last couple of weeks. And also maybe at the top of the list, though, would be western upper Michigan. That's an area that has been missed by a lot of the major precipitation that we've seen in the state and the region really over the last 4 to 6 weeks. You can see that show up here fairly well in on the left-hand side here in our vegetation drought response index, with lots of sort of the browns and oranges indicating that the vegetation there is not able to basically respond to the atmospheric demand for moisture. You can also see that in the thumb here as well, but not quite as vivid or as striking as it is in the western upper. But overall, again, many areas in the state are at or above where they typically are at this time of the year, thanks to the recent heavy rains. Well, looking at our outlook, and again, I'm using the word autopilot, high pressure, which is basically the center of which is way up here in Northern Ontario in Canada, it's going to stay there and set the stage for several, and several, in this case, several is anything from 2 or 3 up to maybe a half a dozen or 7. This is going to be on the longer end of that, because we are looking at a almost essentially identical forecast here for the next many days, at least 3 or 4 before any chance of precipitation with this high pressure entrenched here. Just to our south, we can see, and this is the radar shot here, about an hour and a half old. You can still see what now is Tropical Depression Ida, made, of course, landfall on Sunday afternoon as a major hurricane in Louisiana. It's slowly making its way north and east. And thanks to that little bit of northwesterly trajectory of the jet stream, all of that moisture is going to remain south of Michigan. So we won't see any of the remnants of that. You can see there's still an old frontal boundary here. This is what went through the night before last with on Sunday, with some thunderstorms across the state, again, some of which were heavy. And it made it down to the Ohio Valley. And unfortunately for people that are in the Ohio Valley and to the east of that, over to the Mid-Atlantic, it's going to serve as a focusing mechanism for the moisture that's left with Ida, and lead to all sorts of heavy 2, 3, 4 inches of rain with flash flood risk. But again, all of that will remain south of us and east of us, and set the stage for a continued fair, dry forecast here through at least Friday. Here's the map for tomorrow morning. Again, here's the remnants of Ida as it incorporates into the mid latitudes now, into that frontal boundary. High pressure still, the blue H is just to the north here off the map. Here's Thursday morning. And again, that's what's left of Ida over the Washington, D.C. area. And then we start to see the next weather system at least to approach, because typically this would be our next chance for rain. And it is technically, we will see the chance for some scattered showers, probably in western upper Michigan as early as overnight Thursday into early Friday. But the bottom line is here, this is going to be weakening as it comes closer. And it's probably only going to affect portions of upper Michigan. We won't see anything from that in the southern part of the state. There is another impulse that will come through on Saturday, and a weak upper air disturbance. There's very little moisture for this to work with. So there will be technically a non-zero, we'll call it isolated showers, possible statewide on Saturday into Sunday, but most areas will remain dry through at least then. Beyond that, if we look at this is almost getting to the medium range, there's another chance for precipitation, maybe about Tuesday or so of next week. But we are looking, folks, at I think many places in the state will not see any precip at all. But because temperatures are near normal, basically from the low and mid 70s in the north to around 80 in the far south during the daytime, nighttime temperatures from the upper 40s north to the mid 50s, upper 60s in some cases, almost on a daily basis. Repeat, same pattern. And the next few days, again, gorgeous, mostly sunny. There will be a few clouds from time to time, but fair and dry is the operative phrase here for where we're at for the next few days. Total precipitation for the upcoming week, this is through next Tuesday, the 6th. You can see maybe a quarter of an inch in far western and northwestern parts of the state. I think that's really probably aggressive with the forecast because I think most places are going to see little or no precip for the week. We don't say that very often. We tend to, climatologically here in Michigan, we get precip about every third day or so on average. So it's to go through a whole week without precip, it happens, but it's not very common in our type of climate. But this is one of the weeks that probably or likely will occur in many areas. Our potential evapotranspiration rates here for the upcoming week, given the temperatures down below what they've been, in most areas are a little bit close to maybe a little bit below normal for this time of the year. You can see the weekly totals here ranging from about 0.8 in the far northern part of the state to about 1.1. So somewhere on that order of maybe 1/1200ths, 1/1300ths of an inch per day, but they'll be less definitely than what we have been seeing for the last couple of weeks for water demand. But given, again, the dry trend, the other issue will be for some places you're going to have to add water because it has been, in certain areas, it has been a while since we've had significant precipitation. Now, in the medium range forecast time frame, as we started off here, that right-hand panel, this looks very, very similar to that map that you saw at the beginning with troughing over the eastern part of the U.S. and actually Michigan here in northwesterly flow. And this is a little bit of a new development. This product, of course, is issued every day around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it is suggesting cooler than normal mean temperatures here for the 5th through the 9th. And given that upper air outlook, that probably is I think a fairly good bet. Now, note also that for precipitation, that Michigan is sort of in between two areas. Wetter than normal to our east, drier than normal to our west. So it's a little bit tough to call. The 8 to 14 day time frame, which goes beyond this into the second week, or well into the second week of September, is pretty similar to this, near to below normal mean temperatures. But it does suggest also with time that the troughing here, the amplitude of this is reduced, and we go back to something closer to normal. But it's certainly different from many of the longer term outlooks that we've been looking at over many of the last few weeks, calling for a warmer than normal. So at least a temporary break in that pattern looks like is coming. Greater chances for precipitation next week than this week. So again, at least a little bit closer to normal probably than we've been. We will be this week. I would also say overall here, though, with the medium range forecast guidance, given this type of an upper air pattern, I would say that the forecaster confidence in this is probably lower. The reliability and expectations for this outlook are probably less than than what we would like. But it's part of the season. We are getting close to going into the transitional season now and into fall. And we typically see a drop off in skill, or sometimes see a drop off or change in expected skill. But this outlook, the forecaster conference is probably a little lower than what it is at this time of the year typically. So summarizing, very straightforward. As I mentioned, fair, dry for much of the week with seasonable temperatures, very, very pleasant, but probably going to have to look at water especially in the spots that have been missed with recent rainfall, because we are looking at another extended period now without much in the way of precip. If we do see precip, again, far north overnight Thursday, maybe a couple spots here over the weekend, but it's certainly not going to be anything widespread. It will be the exception rather than the rule. And then, as you saw, cooler temps next week, below normal, maybe a little bit more in the way of precipitation than we see this week. And I'll stop there. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. So it sounds like, at least as we look to the upcoming Labor Day weekend, sounds like some pretty good weather overall.
It really does. And it's just, again, here locally in Hazlet, we've had some rain, but the dryness is already starting to show up a little bit, at least with my very, very unprofessionally managed turf that I have here. But it is, the dryness is showing up again. And
it's amazing. It's amazing how quick it's come and gone, because we've gone from these heavy rainfall events, and then it's just like we get these intermittent periods where it's like, I can't believe it's already looking dry if it's not irrigated, but it has kind of been that way for a number of weeks, it seems like.
And it will, not that it's going to sneak up on anybody, but I suspect, given our forecast, even though it's going to be cooler, it will show up that there will be water needed in many places.
Especially with that drop in humidity too.
Right.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. And we'll be back again soon.
We'll see you next week.